is that the advances in technology over the last 50 years are due to the crash of an alien spaceship in 1947, and that he had the debris from this craft. And he gave pieces of it to various laboratories and research institutes, and they came up with lasers, fiber optics, and integrated computer chips.
The patents you just reviewed are only a few that one has to ask themselves, where did such complex, outrageous ideas come from? February 2nd, 1998. Colonel Philip J. Corso, member of President Eisenhower's National Security Council and former head of the Foreign Technology Desk in the U.S. Army, has come forward in this conference titled At the Ranch to explain to the public how he spearheaded the Army's reverse engineering project that led to today's integrated circuit chips, fiber optics, lasers, and super tenacity fibers, and seeded the Roswell alien technology to giants of American industry.
The book that he wrote, The Day After Roswell, it's on back order here. We'll be getting it later this week. It's a wonderful book that is the first book to come out in the UFO field to tell some hard evidence of what has happened from Roswell and after Roswell, and how the alien technology was used. Colonel Corso has a very distinguished military career that I've actually told them about already. I warmed them up and gave them a lot of information about you already. And one of the things that I was most impressed with when I met him, not far from his home, was that when we left to say goodbye, he got into a car that I wasn't sure was really his. It was a purple Firebird. He says to me, his family thinks he's crazy, 80 years old, and he went out to buy a purple Firebird.
Yeah. I will tell him, I wanted a younger man's car, not an old man's car.
Exactly. He said to me, if I can drive a tank, then I can drive a purple Firebird. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you a very distinguished man, Colonel Philip J. Corso.
Well, the first thing I want to tell you when I look at this audience, I'm really proud to be here. Now, I don't speak from a prepared text, and I want you to ask me questions. I want you to guide me. Tell me what you want to know. I'll try to answer your questions. A lot I can't answer because this subject, I don't know the answers to a lot of things. But I will try the best, and I want you to ask me questions. Don't worry about losing my trend of thought. I will stop and answer your questions if I can. And I always do that. I don't like to get up here and run the show. I want you, it's your show. And really, all of you remind me of one of the proud things I've done in my life. the Army saw fit to give me command of a combat battalion, 1,500 men. Average age of those boys was 19 and a half, even with no codger like me in command. And I used to sit them in the field, just like you're sitting here. And I was proud of those boys. And this reminds me almost of that. All of you sitting there. And I know this subject here, a lot of people say, well, thank you, you had the courage to write it. It didn't take courage. My own grandchildren, my nephew, who was a research director of a corporation, he said, please, Uncle Phil, tell us. We want to know. And that influenced me. No one has ever told me not to talk. I did this book, and I speak here on my own free will. No one has told me what to talk or what to say. I tell you the truth as I know it. And I want you to help me by asking questions. Now, I will start at the beginning almost. My first experience, when I came back from World War II, and I was Chief of Security and Intelligence of Rome Area Command at the time, I was sent to the Pentagon. I didn't like it, so I asked for another assignment. So they sent me to Fort Riley, Kansas. And it was a good tour. First time in my life I'd had garrison tour. Before that, I was always in the combat area. So while I was there, one night I was the post-duty officer. That meant that I was in charge that night, and I was responsible for the guards. So I went down, we had still had horses then, I went down to the veterinarian area, and I was told in my instructions that there was a sensitive area down there. So I went down, and one of the sergeants I knew real well, who was the Army champion of bowling, I used to bowl with him, and he was a sergeant of the guard. And I went to inspect the guard, and he asked me, he said, Colonel, you want to see something? I told him, well, this is a pretty sensitive area. Yes, what do you have? So he took me in the back room, and there was 6 crates there. And so I had my flashlight, and I turned it on the crates, and I lifted the tarpaulin one, and I was a little stunned because I saw a body in there. I thought at first it was a child, but then I looked closer, and I saw the oversized head. Not a great big head. For the body, it was big. And I saw the eyes. And immediately, I realized what it was. It had long arms, long fingers, 4 on each hand, and it had like a skin-tight suit on. And it was floating in some sort of liquid. And they were on their way to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and they'd come from New Mexico. The drivers told my sergeant. It was an alien extraterrestrial in there that I saw. Now, I looked at it, maybe, I'm telling you all this, but not even as long as I took to describe it to you, only about 10 or 15 seconds. And then I just let it pass. I figured I'm an intelligence officer, so maybe someday later in the future I'll be able to corroborate this, what this is and what it was. And I promptly forgot about it. Then 10 years passed. Right after that, soon after that, I ended up, another war started in Korea. It took off right at the beginning, and I was pretty busy for the next 3 years. Then I ended up at Panmunjom. I was a member of the truth delegation. And I met our prisoners as they were being exchanged, and I've testified in front of Congress 3 times on the missing prisoners of war. Maybe some of you saw me. I was on prime time in 2020. They wanted to know about the prisoner. Actually, on MacArthur's staff, I was in charge of the missing prisoners of war in enemy territory. And then I came back from the Korean War, and I got assigned to the White House, which was sort of a surprise. The special assistant of the president sent for me, and I became a member of the White House staff, National Security Council, under President Eisenhower. And I was there for 4 years. I handled prisoner of war things, Evans, flying saucer reports. They know about it. President Eisenhower knew about it, because I discussed it with him. And I had every clearance that you could have. I had 9 in addition to top secret. And I was actually on the National Security Council. And I stayed there 4 years. I was supposed to go for 3 years, but they extended me a year, so I stayed 4. At the end of the 4th year, I received orders to take command of the Army missile firing range at White Sands in New Mexico. And I took command of this range. But first, an order appears from the Secretary of the Army, Mr. Brucker, extending me the 5th year. So I went to the President, Eisenhower, and I told him, Mr. President, all my life I wanted the major command. Now they've given it to me. But they extended me here for another year. If I stay, that command won't be there next year. Of course, you understand, Mr. President. And he looked at me and smiled. He said, I understand. You get on that phone and call Career Branch. You're taking over your command tomorrow. And he released me. And I ended up at White Sands, New Mexico, right near where the saucer crashed. I commanded the range there for the Army. And I had an experience there which confirmed what I saw. A strange thing happened. Since I was the commander of the base, of the Army base there, not of White Sands, the whole northern area was my area, and I used to fire missiles there. So I took over, and I used to wander around a lot, but the boys thought nothing about it because I used to wander around in my Jeep and command in the desert. Well, one day I got a little angry with White Sands. They were experimenting on the Polaris missile, so they were holding me up. I couldn't fire my missiles. And I told the general at Fort Bliss, why don't we move out here and make our own base? So this continues. So one day I took off in my Jeep, and by the way, I've never told this story in public, and I'm going to tell you now. Because as I look at you, I think you want to hear this. So I took my Jeep and I went down range. A little angry at White Sands because I had 400 men doing nothing. I couldn't fire till they gave me what we called green time. So I was running around down range, and I decided my sergeants had showed me an abandoned gold mine. It was on the range. And there was this gold mine, had water trickling out, and deer and antelope and even rattlesnakes used to come there because of the water. And people don't realize that the desert is full of life. There's a lot of animals, herds of deer, antelope. In fact, my men adopted a burro, and I wasn't allowed to keep him because the Maverick laws in New Mexico say you can't keep wildlife. So I wrote to the governor, darn if he didn't come out with an entourage, flew out, newspapermen and all, and gave us permission to keep the burro, the little donkey. So it belonged to us from then on. Well, he grew up pretty big. Then he used to come to the officers club and bray, so we had to get out and give him a cigarette to eat and a glass of beer to drink. And then, when this was a burro, and then he'd leave. But and every VIP day, which was Thursday when we'd had people, we'd fire missiles for him, he would disappear. And the boys would have to get in their Jeeps and go catch him. And the reason he disappeared, we had a red blanket we put on him with a Nike missile on it, and he didn't like that blanket, so he'd run down the desert. And they'd go catch him and bring him back. And he was a little unhappy. In fact, the boys used to tell me, Colonel, be careful. If you get behind him, he'll kick you, and if you get in the front, he'll bite you. And he did one day. He grabbed my uniform. But later on, I made friends with him, I think. And we had this burro. So going back to where I was, and I was going down range in my Jeep. And I figured, I'm going to the gold mine. It's 110 degrees out here. At least it's cool in there. So I went in the gold mine, walked in, I sat there. And it was cool, so I dozed off. Then as I was dozing off, all at once I reached down and lifted the flap on my 45. I pulled it out, and I pulled the safety off, and I rolled over, and there was something in the corner. Something was draped around the shoulders. And I looked, I figured, what is this, a rattlesnake curled up? But if I fire this pistol in this cave, ricochets might get me, so I better not. And at that moment, I heard something. Something came in my head that said, don't. And then I got the real surprise. So when I heard don't, I figured, what is that thing there? It had a helmet on, like glass, or transparent, a band around its head with this thing in the middle. So I answered, I said, friend or foe? What are you? And then I get an answer back which really shocked me. I asked him friend or foe, and the answer came back, remember, this was all mental telepathy, because the aliens have no vocal cords. So the answer came back, and the answer was neither. So now, remember, I was a soldier. I think in terms of the enemy. But this thing answered me, whatever it was, said neither. So that started me thinking, am I hallucinating here? I'm going crazy. I'm supposed to be a pretty level-headed commander. So all at once I hear, will you give me 10 minutes radar downtime? And then I got confused. I figured, I'm the only man that can give that order. Did this thing know I was here? No one else can give that order but me. And it asked me. So, typical human being, I was thinking in my mind, if I give that order, what's in it for me? So, that's a typical human reaction. So I said, what do you offer? I didn't say what's in it for me. I said, what do you offer? Because the other was two stupid human being words. So finally I got the answer back, which I still don't know what it means. I asked Whitley Strieber, who wrote Communion, what it means. He gave me 3 different answers. This happened in 1957. The answer came back to me. What was his offer? The offer was this: a new world if you can take it. Now, and I thought, what does that mean? What is that he's offering me? So at that stage, I put my 45 back in the holster, put the safety on, and I went out to my Jeep. And I picked up the radio, and I called Captain Williams, range commander. Told him, Captain, this is the colonel. You get green time from White Sands? He said, yes, just came through. I'm giving you an order. Keep our radars down for 10 minutes. I repeat, keep our radars down for 10 minutes, and I'm coming in. I'm on my way. So then I turned around, and I see this thing, the light was reflecting off of the water, standing at the cave entrance. And it had a tight-fitting suit on, like the thing I saw in the casket at Fort Riley, not the casket, the box. So I figured he was standing there, and I looked over, and I figured, now what? It's watching me. So I saluted. I went like that. And I took off in my Jeep. And it would take me, I'd say, from where I was in the desert, about 20 minutes to get back. And I gave him, the order was 10 minutes downtime. I had pretty powerful radars. I had radars in those days that the pencil beam would lock on 200 miles out. In fact, if you came in my area and I showed you the missile like newspaper men, I used to tell them, please take the flash bulbs out of your pocket. You can take all the pictures you want, but take the flash, because the moment I turn my radars on, they'll go off in your pocket. They're so powerful. So, Range Headquarters called me. It was about 15 minutes later. He said, stop at E Battery and pick up the tapes. We picked up something on the radar and locked on. It was going over 3,500 miles an hour. I remember it's 1957. There was nothing could travel that fast that we had. So, all at once I hear, I return your salute. And I figured, well, I'm military, and that's a logical thing. I'm imagining this thing. But then they picked up this thing traveling that fast, going out of the area. Then I thought, I wonder if that thing, whatever it was, is in that flying saucer. I didn't see it. My radars picked it up. And that was, so then I figured, I better forget this. I'm supposed to be a pretty solid type commander. And if I report this to high headquarters, who doesn't want to hear it anyway, I might get tabbed as a kook. And after all, I had orders to take over command of the 1st Missile Battalion going to Germany that had atomic warheads. And I was made Air Defense Commander of Southern Germany when I went over there. And I don't want to jeopardize that. So I didn't report it to anybody or say anything about it. Till now. I didn't even write this in the book. So, in the meantime, I meet Jacques Vallée. Maybe you've heard of him. He's one of the, I think, top authorities on UFOs. Brilliant man. The movie Close Encounters, he was the man, the Frenchman, who was guiding everything. So I met Jacques Vallée, and I told him this story. And Jacques Vallée told me, he said, Colonel, are you an alien? I told him, Jack, you're a pretty brilliant guy. You should know better than ask me that. And then he said, you know they weren't interested in you shutting your radars down. What makes you say that? He said, they were testing you. You have any evidence of that? Yes. Where were you 3 years later? Sitting in the Pentagon, I was the Chief of Foreign Technology Division of Army Research and Development, with full authority to give contracts out, and I had all these artifacts. I was actually in charge. He said, what do you think they were driving at? I told him, well, Jack, for want of a better explanation, I'll take your explanation. Maybe he was right. I don't know. But I was in that position. He was right. I had the artifacts. I was responsible for them. Even my critics lately have been looking up my record on the internet. They found out he was really chief of the Foreign Technology Division. And he disappeared for 3 weeks. That was on the internet. And I figured, wouldn't they like to know where I went and what I did? They don't know that. They're so smart, these skeptics. And I answer the skeptics. I say, you shoot your mouth off and you bleat like stuck pigs and you want to say, show me. If I showed you what we had, you wouldn't know what it was anyway. So don't ask that question. Don't try to pass your stupidity off on me. So I don't answer those critics. They're not worth answering. So I was sitting in the Pentagon, and actually, and then the internet also said, I'll go back to that I left foreign technology and I went up to Plans Division, which was true. I became the general's top assistant. And I was even put on the Army General Staff Corps. And I always thought for a draftee, that's pretty good. I was pretty proud of that, because that's usually reserved for West Pointers and such. And here, I used to take these artifacts, and one day I had them out on my desk. The General Trudeau walked in, head of research and development, and he said, Phil, what do you got there? Looks like your junk pile. And I told him, yes, General, it looks like junk, doesn't it? I had a bundle of wires, a piece of metal about this big, a supercapacitor fiber, a transistor, integrated circuit, and some other items, a little flashlight and things. I had a little flashlight and thing, and I couldn't get it to come on. And like a typical stupid human, I figured the battery was dead. And it came out of the flying saucer. When I took it to our atomic labs, it came on. I thought I was thinking in human terms that there was a battery in there, and it was dead. There was no battery in there. It had its own power source. I sent that to Fort Monmouth, our laboratories. And the general used to call. He said, yes, Phil, it's your junk pile, but those things could change the world. Now, one thing I want to tell you, though, at this stage of the game, don't think that we were so brilliant and so smart that we knew what we had. We didn't. But we had an instinct that they were valuable, that there was something there. I didn't know what a transistor was. Nobody ever knew what. I didn't know what an integrated circuit was. Yet I was in charge of exploiting these things. And didn't know what I had, really. I had a bunch of wires, fiber optics. They wouldn't blink in colors. When I closed my hand, they started to blink in colors. My own hand activated it. So the general said, Phil, we got to lay plans. This is your file now. And I told him, yes, when I open the drawer, the flying saucers fly in and out. So he said, now what you got to do, take off, go out to visit big industries, our laboratories, and find out who is working along these lines, what I think these things are. So I did. And gradually I started to farm them out in regular research and development projects. We had to cover our tracks because of the climate of opinion. Certain people in the government, Congress, they would have destroyed our budget. They would have tabbed us in kooks and destroyed our organizations. So among the few officers who were in the loop, we kept this to ourselves, no paper trail. As the things went out to industry, I had authority to finance them, I had the organization. I even had German scientists on my team, von Braun's people. Now, little by little, I'll tell you what these things were that we had there. So gradually, these started to go out to industry. But we put certain, now everybody says government cover-up. There was no government cover-up. Because of the situation, we had to keep it quiet among ourselves. No paper trail, only mouth to mouth among officers, all had been in combat, we trusted each other. We were able to cover our tracks and we were able to accomplish a lot. So I had the authority to grant the contracts. The provision was, though, there was one provision in there. Take the items we give you, develop them and use them the way you want. And now, American Computer is suing Bell Laboratories, say we gave them the transistor and they took out patents on it. We didn't care. We couldn't make money. As long as you develop it and give it to American people, we'll finance you. That was our provision, and it worked. Lately, when I wrote to some of them and asked for some documents, they said, remember what your contract read. Send everything back to you. And it was true. The contracts were written that way. So we gave it for the competitive edge of the Army and to give it to the people, the developments. And look what came out of them. Now, let me give you another story at this stage of the game, and I'll get in. I had what we called a supercapacitor fiber. Fiber looked like a piece of string. You couldn't cut it, you couldn't dent it, you couldn't set it on fire, you couldn't do anything with it. And I sent it to a Lincoln Laboratories at MIT. And they looked at it, they said, the atoms are lined in it. They were lined. They weren't helter-skelter. So I started searching around for something that was equal to that, because there was no reference to go back to. This was something, a new science like. So what did we find that the closest thing to this supercapacitor fiber was, and I like to tell this story, the spider web. The spider spins his web atomically aligned. We made flak jackets out of it. And it stopped bullets. You can take the spider's web and you can stretch it for miles and it won't break. Marvelous little thing. So we financed Wyoming University. We gave them a contract to try to clone the spider. They didn't succeed. So we weren't getting enough fibers. So we went to development of the present composites, Kevlar and that. Monsanto and DuPont was given the contracts. I gave the fiber optics to Bell Lab, and also I gave them later the integrated circuit. And now this was one of the first things that we gave out. Then we gave the transistor out. Now, the suit right now, which is bubbling all over the internet, American Computer is accusing Bell Laboratories of getting patents on a transistor when the Army really gave it to them, which we did. And they're threatening to sue them now. They said it belongs to the American people, it didn't belong to you, you took patents out on it, you lied. I was on the Art Bell show not long ago, and they had one of these reverse speeches men on. And he brought that up, that I said in my talk to Art Bell, it came out in reverse speech, which is going to replace a lie detector, they claim, that I said illegal patents. I didn't say that, but on the computer, when you reversed the speech, it came out that way. And they took illegal patents. The integrated circuit, which was the size of a quarter, I gave those to Bell Lab. That was my job to give that out. So, marvelous developments started, and we'd watch them. Every time they stood up, reaching the state of the art, and they were stopped, we'd feed them a little more. But as a research and development contract, not as a transistor. They never knew where they came from. And they could take it and use it any way they wanted and develop it, which they did. On the Art Bell show, too, I met the research director of Stanford University lately. And he said, I heard you on the Art Bell show, and it's supposed to reach an audience of about 20 million, they claim. He's on late at night for 3 or 4 hours. I've been on his program twice. And this gentleman told me, he said, I know what you did. When you said artificial life that von Neumann was working on, and Art Bell corrected you, said artificial intelligence, you hemmed and hawed and you didn't correct him. I told him, the only man that possibly caught that could have been you, of all the people who were listening. That's right. I really was talking about artificial life and not artificial intelligence. I had a file from von Neumann, a genius that they accused him of being an alien. He actually was one of the brains behind perfecting the atomic weapon, atomic bombs and things. And he was working on artificial life. And I didn't do anything with that file, and I should have. That file in itself was valuable, but I didn't know enough about artificial life. Now it's coming out, if you've seen it in computers and all. And possibly they'll be able to create an artificial life on computers in the near future. This is a definite possibility, because they're doing it now with geese and animals. And they actually pick up, the computer picks up actually the movements and how the ducks and so forth fly in the air and react. So I really did nothing with that when I should have. Then lately I wrote to a scientist and I sent him a thing that I wrote in my handwriting on fiber optics. We developed that through Bell Laboratory. And the scientist called me back. He runs Institute of Advanced Studies in Austin, Texas. He said, Phil, I looked over this fiber optics. Boy, you know a lot about fiber optics. He said, this little thing you wrote for me is really something. I told him, you think so, Hal? He said, yes. Glad you sent it to me. Now, I'm going to give you the surprise. I didn't write that now. Put the date on it. The date that was written was 1961. And he said, it can't be. I told him, it is. Now, I wrote that in 1961 when we were starting on fiber optics. Now look what happens. The telephone lines, the fiber, and I didn't know what we had. I didn't know whether it was wires, tubes, or what it was when I had those in my hand. So what I tell you, don't think for a minute that we knew everything we had. We didn't. The Army in those days, it was fluid hydrodynamics.
Some people are having trouble hearing. You gotta
Oh,
your
yeah.
hands now.
Okay, I have to hold the napkin like Pavarotti does in my hands.
Just speak up a little,
Yeah.
okay?
So we perfected the first heart pump, 1961. The Army perfected laser cataracts, 1961. We made the first respirator. I talked to Senator Glenn one day and I showed him a photograph of a little cart we made that ran on water. He wanted a picture of it. We also, in those days, it's in the book, there's 50 pages in the book, we worked out on instructions from the general what we called Project Horizon. Project Horizon was to put a military colony on the moon against all enemies. And of course we told Congress, a lot of times there was a lot of stupidity there, and we made them think that we were perfecting this against the communists and the Russians, when really it was aimed at the extraterrestrials. And Project Horizon, there's 50 pages in the book, it was really 310 pages long. I went to see Senator Glenn, and he insisted I gave it to him. I had to give him my only copy that I had at the time. And I knew about that project because I declassified it. Recently, a scientist that I know gave a copy of that to the NASA board of directors, and they were shocked. They never knew such a thing existed in 1959. And if you read the book, there's 50 pages on the back, because the book, we couldn't put the whole 310 pages in. And that was the beginning of all this, and the development started to come out of this. For example, my grandchildren, the oldest one is 15, I have a computer at home, and the internet's on it, and everything, and the copier and all. And I told my son, isn't it strange? I told him, I'm the one that possibly had the biggest hand in developing that thing. And I don't even know how to turn it on. and my own grandchildren, 9 years old and 12 and 15, turn it on and work. I taught in school. And maybe I'm the one that made it, and General Trudeau said the things we did, Phil, might change the world. That computer existed because we put out the transistors and integrated circuit. Now look what it's doing. And the brain, the great brain, doesn't even know how to turn it on, to push the switches. And my grandchildren laugh at that when I tell them that. I tell them, well, that wasn't my job to work it. Somebody else does that. But now, the bad part. 50 years have passed, almost since then. Well, really, almost 40 years. But as I'm looking at this thing now, the way we operated, when we saw that development was slowing down, we fed more information in. Now, as I look at the computers and the chips, the integrated circuits, unfortunately, they're reaching the end of the line. If I was still in charge, I would put a little infusion in there if I had it, to get them moving in the right direction. Maybe they'll give us another chance. Maybe they'll give us another saucer. And I don't know, never figured it out, whether they gave us these developments and these saucers by design or by chance. We didn't care. We had them. That was the main thing. And we used them. And we were able to bring some great developments in the world. Even the MRI machines that you see in hospitals. We started that with microprocessors and so forth. and it's developing. But one day the general called me and he said, Phil, in 5 years, we did what should have taken 250 years. Will we have to wait another 250 years? I hope not, because I'm 82 years old and I'm passing by, but all of you are young yet. You want these developments to continue. And I hope they will, and I think they will. And I just told the people here, something will happen. There'll be another crash, by chance or design, I don't know. But I think it'll happen again. We will get the future. It'll be in there. And there was one great mistake, though, that I made, and I have to blame myself. The greatest gift that they gave us was not the artifacts, because I was a type of person, when I got the artifacts, my profession was military. So when I took these artifacts, the main movement was towards the competitive edge of the Army. That meant that I took these artifacts, and the main effort was to develop weapons of destruction. And I look back, that was wrong. The greatest gift they gave us, we missed out on. We gave us an alien body, a wonderful thing. Now I'm trying to recollect everything I know about that, the autopsies that were made at Walter Reed, our laboratory, and recreate this thing. Could we duplicate it? A wonderful thing, a clone, a humanoid clone, but built for a specific purpose, to travel in space. Man can't travel in space today. Our astronauts, they stay up there more than a month or so, their bones deteriorate. Their muscles deteriorate. Their immune system goes haywire. Their sense of balance goes off. The heart enlarges. Blood pressure goes down. They get disoriented. And some of them, their brain has been affected. Because zero gravity and all are things that we haven't solved yet. So the big mistake is I actually have to blame myself almost. And I'll tell you young people is, I should have made I had the money, the talent, the organization. I should have taken that extraterrestrial and started a research project, #1 priority. We didn't do it. We lost out on it. And people say, you can't blame yourself. I have to blame myself. I was in charge. Why didn't I do it? So maybe it wasn't time yet. That's no excuse. I should have done it. So now it has to be done. That extraterrestrial can travel in space. We can't. NASA's spending all this money, but man can't travel in space, unfortunately. We can't explore the heavens. No. Well, this is the beginning of all this. I got a lot more to tell you. But start asking me questions. You surely want to know more than I've told you.
Hey, Colonel, can you tell us a little bit more about what you saw about the alien physiology?
About the alien?
Alien physiology?
No, what, on the alien, the way he was built?
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit more about their bodies and how they were different and all that?
Sure. So I figured one day to make up my shortcoming and where I was remiss, I have to start getting in my head everything that I learned about the alien. When I had the reports, autopsy reports from Walter Reed, our laboratory, we financed, they had to do what we told them to do. I had to put all this together in my head. And from that, I have to reverse intelligence. I learned intelligence very fortunate when I was a lieutenant. I was sent to London, and I was picked up by British MI-19, one of their oldest intelligence outfits. They were experts. and they taught me intelligence. A very fortunate thing for me. And I was very lucky about that. And they sent me to Cambridge for 3 weeks. I can stand up here and brag it. I went to Cambridge. And I went there because the British had a saying, how green is our ally? But later they said, you learned fast, and you outdid us in a lot of areas. Now, the British intelligence works a little different than ours. We go after targets and things, but the British intelligence goes after intentions. What's the enemy's intention? So when I started on this extraterrestrial body, recollection, the starting point is the intention. Why did his creators or the cloners do? What intention they have of this thing that they made? He's not in the sense the clone like we talk about clones and this thing in the sheep now of creation and they'll live forever. The extraterrestrial was not that at all. And we gave it the name extraterrestrial biological entity is what it is. So when I start putting this together and I reverse engineered it, or intelligent, and I went through the whole body like Evel's asked me to do. The brain, for example, there's 4 lobes there. We only have 2. There was no communication devices in this flying saucer. There was no food. There was no water. There was no toilet facilities. There was no oxygen. And the general even asked me this, my God, Phil, you reverse engineered this, what's not in there, how they survive, how they live. Tesla gave us the clue. The electromagnetic beings, they propagate by electronic magnetism. The flying saucers are an environment that's enclosed in an electronic element. We've never been able to fly a flying saucer. We've never been able, and we just had this discussion, because the extraterrestrial is part of the flying saucer. He's the brain. He's the guidance system. He's part of it. He controls that by his fingers. Each fingertip of ours has 8,000 nerve ends to it. His brain has a different windings. He had a brain implant, which his creators programmed. And he supplied the energy for the flying saucer. So every time we tried to fly this flying saucer, the Germans had one, they crash. Because we make the mistake of what we called product improvement, not research and development. And you can't start to take an airplane and improve it to put it in space. It won't work. This is a new science, a different science. And the extraterrestrials were built with that specific purpose. The one lobe is the brain of the flying saucer. It's programmed by his superiors. The other is a communication system. There's no communications in the flying saucer. Well, they communicate through the other lobe. The 2 rear lobes are like ours, body functions and so forth. So the key to the flying saucer is the extraterrestrial. Now, instead of me getting all these letters I got from the general public, and I have hundreds of letters at home, and they're piling up, I haven't had time to answer them. And I'll have to answer them because these were good people writing to me. And now it's changing. Instead of me getting letters from the general public, scientists are starting to call me. They saw in the book that the extraterrestrial was part of the flying saucer. They were all one. Now, Burt Rutan, the big designer that flew around the world, he came to my house special, all the way from Moab Desert, California. Spoke to him for 7 hours. He wants to be the first civilian in space. You can't do it by building airplanes, what you're building, to take somebody in space. Can't be done. This is a new science, and we treat it as product improvement. It isn't. You can't do that. So, for example, one simple thing. The extraterrestrial had no hair. figured his creator has hair. Why didn't they give him hair? He didn't need it. Also, hair is a bother. Little hairs come loose, dandruff comes off, it can foul up your electronic equipment. He didn't need hair. So his creators didn't give him any hair. He didn't need any ears. He doesn't have to hear. He doesn't have to collect sound. He gets his instructions through programming of the brain and mental telepathy. He has no nose. He doesn't breathe oxygen. There's no oxygen in that thing. What's he breathe? We don't know. There was a funny smell in the flying saucer. He breathes something. I don't know what it is. He only has two holes. He has no mouth. He doesn't eat. He doesn't need to. Lately, I talked to my doctor. He operated on me not too long ago. Actually, 2 years ago, I had a serious thing in my stomach, and he saved my life. I talked to my doctor, and he said, well, Phil, how they propagate? I told him, well, Doc, take a look at us. We're human beings. What if we don't get any nourishment? What happens? We die and fade away. Exactly what happens to them. You take them out of their environment, which is electromagnetism, they fade away and die. They need that envelope electronic. All the ones we got, they faded fast. That's the reason. He said, well, I guess that's right. A human will fade just as fast if you don't have no nourishment. Their nourishment is electromagnetism. Now, I've never told this in public. That's what these scientists are calling me for. They want to know. And one of them lately, pretty famous scientist, he said, I read your book. Now I read it the second time, and I see what you left out. You didn't state the whole story. Told him, well, you recognized it. I only told you 10% of the story. Why? Too much for the public to try to read that all at one time. It was, for many years, it was a little too much for me and us. So how did I expect the public to know? And I used to tell my commanders, I'll tell you a funny story. When my commanders came and gave me their reports, monthly reports, and I'd look at it and I'd say, Grants Major, the boys would reach over and grab the paper out of my hand and take off and rewrite it. We had a joke in the Army. The General Grant had a major sitting outside his office, Civil War, and this major had the reputation of being the dumbest, most stupidest man in the whole Union Army. So the Secretary of War came one day and he told General Grant, I know you. That stupid man there has become a legend in the Union Army. He's so dumb and stupid, and you keep him there. Why? I'm your boss, you got to tell me. Grant said, well, I guess I have to tell you. When I write a field order, I hand it to him. If he understands it, everybody does. So, this is the answer why I didn't put everything in the book. I have to take a lot of these things that I did, and I have to explain it in simple terms. So even General Grant's major would understand them. Otherwise, I know that I will go over, and my main aim and what I really like to do is the young people. They're the ones that say, tell us, we want to know. So I aim at them like my grandchildren. I can't start at the top and explain it to them. I got to start down where I can build it up and explain it to them. And I've been mobbed by young boys. They want to know. I tell newsmen a story. And I told them, my nephew was a research director at Daco Corporation. He wrote to me and he said, Uncle Phil, tell us. We want to know. We're not going to pull our hair out and beat our breast. Let us know. And I told him, and gentlemen, I told 400 newsmen this. I'll give you an example. I commanded combat battalion of 1,500 soldiers. Average age, I told 19 and a half. Those boys didn't beat their breast and panic. They fought the greatest army in the world and defeated it. They didn't run. Some died, but they defeated the greatest star, and they didn't run in panic. They're not going to panic. Tell them about the flying saucers. They should know. It's our world coming, not ours. We're too old, but they're going to be around. My own grandchildren want to know. I got to tell them that. And I started to write the book mainly for my grandchildren. I figured I had to leave them a legacy. So I started writing after the general relieved me of my oath. And then my little one, redhead, a real con man, and I tell my daughter-in-law, she said, they con you. I told him, grandfather should be calm, and I love it. I know I'm being conned. He wants to borrow money from me. I told him, yeah, but how are you going to pay it back, Andy? Then he starts to think. I told him, that's all right. I told him, you owe me. You pay someday. Well, this little guy was standing there after they asked me what I did during the war, and I started writing. And this little one comes up to me. He said, hey, Granddad, did you ever see E.T.'s grandfather? You know, the movie E.T.? And I looked at him, and I told him, Andy, maybe I have. You get a little older, I'll tell you about it. This was the cave incident, you know. I thought maybe he was D.T.'s grandfather. Now, many people have asked me, how old are they? Well, that sort of throws me. So here's the way I explain that. I had one report and only one. And I had all the clearances, access to everything at the White House, all access to everything in the government. And I had one report that came from a laboratory that said this extraterrestrial was 200 years old. Now, I can't prove that. I have no further evidence. This is based on a single report. In intelligence, that's not worth much. But that's all I can say. I don't know anymore. I've been asked many times, where'd they come from? My answer to that is, I wish I knew. We don't know. Maybe we will someday. I can't tell you I know. I don't know. And I explain most of these things that way. I tell them, I will answer you if I know. If I don't know, I'll tell you. I can't tell these boys that. Now, in Italy, I had a strange experience when I was over there, and this was the only international conference I ever appeared on. I was mobbed over there by newspaper men and all. And the young boys, 18 and 19, were coming up to me in droves. And this girl that was my escort that teaches at the American school there in Rome, she used to come up, and these boys would be talking to me and trying to ask me questions in English. And this girl would come in and say, but the colonel speaks Italian. Oh, the boys would light up, and then I was stuck for the next half hour asking me questions. And I had to explain it to them in Italian. And these boys were interested. This happened, the same thing happened to me in the States here. The young boys coming up to me, 18 and 19. They want to know. So newsmen asked me about the Air Force and the dummies. I told them why they are dummies for what they did. I told them, please, gentlemen, don't ask me to criticize the Air Force. I fought with them in Korea. I have many friends in the Air Force. Don't ask me to criticize the sister service. I won't do it. But I will criticize the superiors. They didn't have to do this. It was stupid to do it. It wasn't necessary. They shouldn't have done it. They look like fools. Now, I will criticize them. It didn't have to be done that way. Look what I wrote there, the things I put in. People are eating this up. I never imagined I would write a book. I wrote this thing. I didn't imagine it ever go anyplace. It became a bestseller because the simple reason it was ready. People and the young people wanted to hear this stuff. They wanted to know. So the book rings of that it's authority. It is real. I lived through those things. And they recognize that. And they love it. They want to know more, though. Wilbur Smith, a Canadian genius, told me one day, he said, be careful, Colonel, from what you say, because every time you say something, you invite 1,000 questions. He said, wait till you retire or die. And I told him, oh, he was a Canadian genius on electromagnetism. I told him, Smith, I guess you're right. But tonight I invite 1,000 questions. Don't be sure that I can answer all of them, but I invite the questions.
Before we go to questions, can you tell us a little bit about, well, one of the interesting things we were told at the house was he showed us a couple of chapters that may end up in your next book, if you agree to do this book. But in there you showed a diagram to Jay-Z, which we were pretty surprised at because we had been taught very well, and one of the things we were taught was the double band, the electromagnetic bands going in counterclockwise rotation. That was the propulsion for the ship. And then we saw that on your diagram it was exactly the same. Could you tell us a little bit about the ship as well before we go to questions?
She explained it to me tonight. I told her, you know more about this than I do. Why don't you write a part that we put in the new book? And she does. What she explained to me tonight was real. She explained a lot of things I didn't know. So, and I want her now to write it and put it in the book. And I told her earlier, I told her, I'm going to put you on the spot. When you came and met me yesterday and you came up to me, I recognized you when you came up. We had met before. Now I'm going to put the burden on you. Where did we meet? I'm not going to tell you where I met you. You're going to tell me. So she's still pondering on that. I put her on the spot.
For those
She's
of
right.
you who don't know, Jay-Z was born right in Roswell, New Mexico, a year before the crash.
Yeah. There were two crashes. People don't know this. One crash was at Roswell, where Jay was born. The other crash was about 100 miles west at St. Augustine in the mountains. There were 6 bodies there we found. So there were 2 crashes.
Our technology has grown in a complete remarkable non-exponential fashion from the 1950s until the present time. Here you can see, after referring to DeepSeek AI for a search to reflect the U.S. in technological growth, in productivity expanded from the invention of electricity to 5,000% growth in productivity from 1870 to 1950. We then went from the 1950s to present time, giving us the invention of CPUs, which brought us to a staggering 250 billion% growth in productivity through computational power. How many of you believe this calculation is plausible? I leave you now with a final thought. Many people who have come forward, who've claimed to speak to aliens, say it's done by using telepathy. We now have the ability to do this as well with the latest technology.
Experimental brain chip Neuralink sharing his remarkable story. 30-year-old Nolan Darbaugh is paralyzed from the shoulders down.
You just played some music? Yeah, man. That's awesome.
Now he can play music or chess, use a smartphone, all with just his thoughts. When he was 22, Nolan says he jumped into a man-made lake and sustained a spinal cord injury. His mom is his full-time caregiver.
I didn't have anything to wake up for in the morning, and this has changed that for me.
What can you do now with the chip implanted that you could not do prior?
I can control a computer just like anyone else can.
The chip connects to his brain with threads thinner than a human hair. In recent weeks, some of those threads retracted, affecting his abilities.
We rolled up our sleeves and found various different ways to, for Nolan, be able to recover his performance, which we have successfully been able to do.
Nolan telling me he hopes his story can help inspire others.